Good morning. Please remain standing while prayers are said by the chaplain, Tricia Wilson.
Loving and wise God, we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for life itself and the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. We thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honour of our appropriate responsibilities. Thank you for the freedom to embrace you or reject you, and thank you for loving us even so. I pray for peace, order and justice. I pray for our city mayor and our ceremonial mayor, for our elected members and all staff employed within our civic centre. I pray for this assembled council that you would grant them wisdom to govern, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony, even when there is honest disagreement, and for personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today, that it may benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Salford. It is in your blessed name that I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Item 1, announcement of special business. I have not been notified of any announcements or special business. Apologies, please.
Councillors Fletcher, Helps, Stone, Mushatir, Barnes, Church. Councillor Hedfield.
Councillor Collinson. Thank you. Declaration of an interest, item 3. Councillor Saunders.
Can we have a ruling on this from Miranda's whether all councillors who are not intending to stand down before May 2020 have to declare that as an interest at this meeting?
I don't think so, no.
Thank you. Item 4.
Councillor Saunders, do anything?
Item 4, boundary review. Councillor Merry.
Yes, that would have been incredibly amusing. Saunders, that would probably have made the council inquirate in terms of numbers. I'd like to start with an apology, if I may, because traditionally the council has not met in the month of August, as long as I can remember. And unfortunately, we do have to meet because of timetables set not by us, but by the Boundary Commission in terms of the review that they're currently conducting. And that's the second point I'd like to make, is that this is not something that the council initiated, but the local government boundary review is undertaken by a statutory body appointed by the government, and I've no quarrel about its non-partisan nature, appointed by the government to deal with councils where the sizes of wards have got out of kilter, as it were, and go over a trigger mechanism. And in our case, we've got two issues, which I'll come on to in a moment, which have actually initiated this particular review. I'm no stranger to boundary reviews. In fact, when I was growing up, my father's ward on the old City of Birmingham Council disappeared completely as a result of a boundary review, causing a few months of anxiety while he was trying to find a new seat. So I do understand that boundary reviews make a big difference to people's lives, and very often they cut across boundaries which have been in place for a number of years. But we have a fundamental problem in terms of addressing the issues in Salford as we stand at the moment. We have a ward, Odsal, which is projected to reach 23,000 electors, which is way over the average size of wards within the city of Salford. We also have wards, particularly in Earlham and Cadishead, which are significantly below the average number in Salford, and the Boundary Commission has drawn our attention to that. And somehow we have to address those particular issues. Now, the last boundary review I was involved in, and many people here will remember it, required us to get rid effectively of a seat in the old city, in the city of Salford, and to replace it with a seat in the outer areas. This time the situation is reversed. In a sense, we are victims of our own success. We have a situation where people, for the first time in a generation, have wanted to come and live in Salford. Population has increased significantly over the last 10 to 15 years, and we have to actually address that. In the first part of this particular review, you may remember we had a lively debate when we put forward our proposals for 20 wards, remaining effectively as we were as we stood at that moment in time. I've no idea what the Conservative group eventually put forward, or if indeed they did put a thing, because they chose not to make that public, right? But the fact remains that the Boundary Commission accepted our recommendation for 20 wards. And we are doing now, I think, what is the right and honourable thing to do, which is to make our proposals public, to ask for the support of the City Council in supporting these particular proposals and hopefully taking them forward. Now, effectively, we are creating a new ward in the Odsal area. We have to do that because of the nature of the population and because otherwise we would be actually convening the Boundary Commission recommendations. And their view is that wards, as far as possible, should not deviate from the average by more than 5%. That's their ideal solution. However, in certain circumstances, and we've pointed out those circumstances, they are prepared to accept wards between 5 and 10%, providing there are compelling reasons. And there are particular reasons at both ends of the city where obviously we have a situation where we can't expand into Manchester much as though we might want to do so, and we can't expand into Warrington and the surrounding areas, even though the Mayor would actually like to take parts of Warrington into Salford. So we are making a case in this that we are going to slightly deviate from the norm in those particular instances. And the informal guidance we've had is that yes, they think that that would be acceptable, providing we sustain the case. The other thing I was acutely aware of is that whenever a boundary review takes place, people always accuse parties of gerrymandering and deliberately choosing ward boundaries to suit themselves. I just gently point out to the Conservative group in particular that both the wards in Boothstown, Ellenbrook and the surrounding area, Worsley, were actually below quota. However, tempting though it was to eliminate one of those particular wards, right, we decided that we were going to take an adult approach to this, and we were actually going to keep those particular wards in existence with some adjustments to the boundaries. So I think that we would actually resent, and some of my colleagues I'm sure would definitely resent, the accusation that we attempted to gerrymander the wards in our favour. We worked incredibly hard, I think, to put forward fair proposals, and proposals which, as far as possible, acknowledge community boundaries and acknowledge natural boundaries in the divisions that we've made. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that this has not caused some degree of anguish to all of us. We have, for example, had to look at areas and say that necessarily they have to move from one ward to the other. The problem is that if we don't do it, then the Boundary Commission will do it for us, basically. And I would rather come up with a local solution that at least respects local boundaries as much as possible than come up than expect to see one imposed on us from the centre, from London, if you like, which we've had no say in terms of shaping. So I want to thank all the councillors who have contributed to this particular scheme, even if at the end of the day we didn't always agree. We at least had a passionate debate about it and about the way forward for Salford. And at the end of the day, right, this is a boundary review that respects where people are at the moment. What it can't do is it can't take into what it looks at. Areas that have been specifically told to us by the Boundary Commission we can't look at. We can't look at, for example, the spatial framework, to answer one question that was put to me by somebody who's actually opposed to the spatial framework, and then proceeded to ask, why can't you take it into account when determining ward populations? Well, there is a slight contradiction there, but we'll leave that to one side. The fact is that the spatial framework has not been approved, is going to go out for consultation and may be heavily modified as a result of that consultation and the decisions that are taken on it. The Boundary Commission's view is that we can take into account existing planning permissions, but not ones that are so far in the future that can't actually be part of our consideration. So with all of that, I think we've struck the right balance. It's not been a series of terribly easy decisions. I'm sure there are people who are not entirely content with the views that we've adopted. But at the end of the day, we unfortunately have to deal with one overriding factor, and that is numbers. We cannot come forward with proposals, for example, that keep wards in being that are hugely below the average size in Salford. That's considered to be unfair because those wards would get particular treatment. We also cannot come forward with wards that are massively over the numbers that we have set as the average for Salford. If we do that, again, that's considered to be unfair, that people are not getting the right levels of representation. So that's what we've tried to do. I commend these proposals to you. I hope we can get agreement fairly rapidly in terms of this City Council, and that we can submit this to the Boundary Commission. Ideally, I would like to see a unanimous support for it across this council chamber, but I recognise that other people may wish to keep their powder dry. Thank you very much. Is that okay?
Am I red? I'm on. Excellent. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Merry as well for, whilst I didn't agree with all of it, I think it was a fair and useful summation of how we got to this point and some of the issues that all councillors of all political colours are wrestling with when it comes to a boundary review. A couple of procedural things, I think, to say first, and I don't intend to speak for too long, and I hope we're not going to have 2 hours of debate here. I don't think that would be in anyone's interest. First of all, one thing that some members of our group noticed was that this submission has been published on the council's website as if it has already been approved. It says, as part of the independent consultation process, the council has made a submission to the Boundary Commission setting out its ward boundary proposals. Now, I'm sure this was an honest mistake, but I don't think that that was something that reflects very well on the democratic nature. We know that there's an overwhelming majority for the ruling group, but I hope that that won't happen again. I'm grateful actually to Councillor Merry for confirming that there was a legal requirement to hold this meeting. So it's not the case that this was published on the website as a final draft and then we're just here to sort of nod it through. So I would hope that that wouldn't happen again. Councillor Merry referred to the debate at the previous meeting about council size. Now, the Commission does publish all responses to the consultation, and it was referred to in their final report. After a very interesting debate at the last meeting about a fictitious Conservative submission, Councillor Merry will be pleased to know that actually we supported their recommendation for 60 councillors in full, and we're more than happy to share that submission with Councillor Merry, as he clearly seems to have missed it. I'd like to say thank you to all the council officers who have worked on this submission. It is a weighty tome. I know Councillor Merry referred to some of the ruling group councillors who I'm sure have had long and detailed discussions about this. Obviously, as a opposition group, we don't have the same access to officer resources that the ruling group have. We are very grateful for the support and direction that we were given by those officers, but essentially we are having to put our alternative together ourselves, and we will be making an alternative submission to the Boundary Commission before the deadline next week. We'd like to encourage all our residents to contribute. This isn't just a consultation for the people and the councillors within this chamber. This is a consultation open to everyone. I don't suspect that they will be battering the door down with responses, but we would want to encourage all residents to contribute either at this stage or once the draft proposals have been published. So just finally, without wanting to overextend my welcome, we can't support this proposal today. There are some areas where we agree with the City Council's submission. There are a number of others where we do not, and where we think that we can better reflect community ties and better meet the 3 guidelines set out by the Boundary Commission. As I said at the start, we will be submitting an alternative. That alternative will be published by the Boundary Commission, and I'm sure it will be a riveting read for the ruling group in due course. It would have been nice to be able to bring it today. As I've said, we don't have the same resources that the City Council group do, and we are working very hard to try and make the best possible submission that best reflects the communities of the City of Salford. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments?
Yeah, I think the Conservatives are going to tell us what their views are.
Through the chair.
How extraordinary.
It's a bit disappointing, although I welcome Councillor Lindley's support for aspects, a bit like the curate saying that he thought it was good in parts, but the fact remains that this was an opportunity, I would have thought, for the Conservative group to put forward their proposals and win support from residents for those particular proposals. Apparently it's top secret, and you know, eventually we will see it in retrospect when the Boundary Commission gets to publish the submission. Well, fine, but the one thing I want to take issue with is that you had the same offer from officers to give you information, to look at your proposals, to work out whether they worked or not, that the Labour group actually had. In fact, the officers, and I want to pay a tribute to them, have been scrupulously fair in terms of doing that, actually. I'm sorry, I'm summing up. Right, scrupulously fair in doing that, and I rather take exception to the fact that you feel that you haven't had the same resources, because as far as I'm concerned, you've had exactly the same resources as the Labour group. So from that point of view, right, I understand that you wish not to put an alternative proposal. I'm sure that if anybody's excited enough to tune into this webcast, they will have noticed that. And we will carry on, hopefully, with the council supporting this proposal.
Councillor Kelly.
If you're not putting an amendment today, and obviously it's just going to the Boundary Commission, nobody in the City of Salford know what the Tories are proposing for their boundary review. However, we, as it was said in John's opening remarks, you know, some of the recommendations people are not happy about, so should all constituents, your constituents as well, not know what you're offering them? Because, you know, there is a backlash out there. People are not happy about the boundary review, so I'd have thought it was in the interest of the city that we actually shared or had the offer of seeing your proposals. Thank you.
So, Councillor Lilley.
Thank you for your discretion, Chair, just to, through you to respond to Councillor Kelly. We will submit our response, which is being finalised at the moment, to the Boundary Commission, at which point it will be published in full for all residents to see as part of the consultation process, and we look forward to them commenting on our proposal just as they are on the City Council's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions that councillors haven't already spoken? If not, I wish to take... Sorry.
Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm surprised by the Conservative group, to be honest, that they don't want to put the proposals forward. We talk about community engagement. There's a lot to work, and I want to say thank you to everyone who's been involved behind the scenes, put these proposals together, because I know a lot of work's gone into it, particularly the likes of Councillor Dickman, who's obviously put a lot of work in behind the scenes. But if these proposals are accepted, this is about community engagement, this is about involving the public, and the Conservatives are alienating the public now by not actually putting their views forward. We're talking about parishes that are over 150 years old that have been torn apart politically. We need to look at community groups afterwards, neighbourhood management, and yet you're not giving these proposals that you want to put forward the chance for the public to get engaged with before the 3rd of September. I think it's important that we do engage the public, and I would urge, like Councillor Lindley said, the public to get engaged. The public have seen Labour's proposals, they haven't seen the Tory proposals, and all they've got to comment on is ours. It is a very difficult job that people have to deal with, but the boundaries are pretty fair now. There are a few exceptions, but we do need to make sure that the public are engaged, because in the future, come 2020, that's when our work begins in terms of trying to rebuild communities once the voting's taken place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could the proposal standing in my name, please?
Sorry?
I'll move the proposal standing in my name.
In your name?
Yeah.
Move it.
Okay. It's been moved as a seconder.
Councillor Walsh.
Okay.
Councillor Antabus.
Councillor Antabus.
Sorry.
Right. Councillor Antabus seconded. You have the right to speak.
No, I don't want to speak. I just want to show my support for Councillor Murphy.
It's straightforward and on the same side as Councillor.
Yeah. Thank you. The council has asked to endorse the draft wording of the Patton's submission. A show of hands, please. Those for. Thank you. Those against? There are no abstentions. Thank you. That is the end of the council meeting.